Hello, my name is Bjørn and I run something called Noodle Coder. This is a tutorial on event delegation. But to explain event delegation, I'm first going to shortly explain how events happen in the browser. In this tutorial, we're just going to focus on the click event. There are minor differences between events, but for most cases this would be perfectly fine. So if you trigger a click event in the browser, like for instance clicking one of these buttons I have here, then that event is going to happen in phases. So let's try and click one of them. I click the purple one. Then you can see these circles are going to light up purple. And down here you can see a box that says body, left and 2. And this box down here shows the first phase that's going to happen. That's the capturing phase. And in the capturing phase, the event that you triggered by clicking, it moves down from the window element and then down to the body element and down to this element and to the L2. And in the capturing phase, you can listen for that. Like over here I have an event listener attached to each of these boxes you see, and by setting the last parameter to true, I'm listening for this particular phase. The phase that comes right after the capturing phase is called the bubbling phase, and that's the one that we are most interested in and the one that you're probably going to use the most. So if I change this one to false, then it means that I don't want to listen for capturing. It means that I'm listening for bubbling instead. And bubbling events, if I click the same button, goes the opposite way. So you can see down here the order is reversed. So now first it's L2 and then it's left and then it's body, and finally you would end up at the window element. So that's the opposite way. So to recap, what happens when you click something is that first the capturing phase enters, where the event moves down the DOM tree from the window element down through all of these parents down to the element just before the element you clicked. And then the bubbling phase happens where it moves back up again. And that's basically what it is. There are other phases. There are one called at target, and that's when the event reaches the target that you actually clicked. So if you had an event listener attached to the button itself, it would be triggered when it's at the at target phase. And there's also a none phase, and that just means there's nothing going on. So event delegation is taking advantage of this bubbling phase to minimize the numbers of event listeners you have on your page. So to illustrate that, I'm going to move over to another setup. So here I have an empty HTML file, and in that one we're gonna build a little setup that's gonna show how event delegation works. And I'm going to use the same styling as I have over here. I've styled some circles I call indicators, and something I call parents, which are these boxes, and then the buttons. So we're just going to use the same thing. So the first thing we need is we need to build up this in the DOM, and we need an indicator. We want that circle because we want these buttons to light up when you click on them. We want the circle to light up when you click on one of the buttons. So we add an indicator, and beside the indicator then we're going to make an unordered list of buttons that we're going to use. So we have the UL. We're going to use the UL as a parent, and the parent is the gray box you see here. So I'm going to call that parent. I'm using IDs here because I only have one, so it's a lot easier to work with. And how many buttons should we make? We can make 3 buttons of 3 LIs that each are going to contain a button. So we need an input, and I'm going to give them a class, and I'm going to use this class to identify the buttons, and you're going to see why in a second. I'm going to call the class can't click, which will probably give you a hint of why I have them there, and it's going to be of type button. So now I have a set of buttons, and I need to give them a value. I'm going to use the value to indicate the colors, to indicate which button you clicked. So I'm just going to call them red, green, and blue. So now if you look over at the left side, you can see I have a red button, green, and a blue button, and they each have a class of CanClick. So if I click them now, nothing is happening. We don't have any event listeners attached. So we're gonna write that code up here. So first thing I do when I write some code like this, I always encapsulate it. That's just good practice to do, to avoid something in global scopes. This is a self-executing function, if you don't know already, and the two parentheses you see here, they're indicating that you're executing the function that you see here. So if I do like, you can write it like this, you can actually also write it like this, which I don't think intuitively makes a lot of sense, because it kind of says that you're executing the parentheses, but you're actually executing the function. So I like to place them inside the parentheses, but of course your choice, you want to do it differently. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to write the code that's going to add the event listener and figure out which button we click. So the first thing we need is we need to identify the buttons, and we use a class for that. So we need a variable to store classes in. So we're going to call it classes, and we call it classes because we don't know how many there are. There could be one class on a button. It could have 10 classes. We don't know. So, and the second thing we need is we need the indicator, because we need to highlight this circle, the indicator, when we click the button. So we go indicator, document get element by ID. Oops. So there we have it. Now that we have the indicator and we have a variable for our classes, then we can attach the event listener. So we're gonna fetch the parent element, and this is where the event delegation come in. You attach an event listener to a common parent instead of attaching one to each element, and that's going to reduce the number of event listeners you have on your page, which is going to reduce the overhead you're going to have on the page. So that's the benefit of event delegation. So we're gonna get that one. Get element by ID, parent, add event listener, and the event listener function takes some parameters. And the first one is what kind of event you want to listen for, and we're gonna listen for a click event. So we type that, and the second parameter is a function, and that function is going to be executed when the event reaches this element. So when you're in the bubbling phase and you're listening for a bubbling event, then when the event reaches that parent, which is going to be the UL, then this function is going to be executed. And that function by default gets passed an event object. We're just going to call that E. So this is our function. We're going to fill it out later. So the last parameter that we are going to pass to the add event listener function is a parameter that indicates if you want to listen for capturing phase or not, and it's like it's a boolean. So if you type in true, then you're listening for capturing phase. That means that you're listening for the event moving down the DOM tree from the window object and down to the parent object of the one you clicked. That is not normally what you would do, as we talked about before. So we're going to put it to false. You can leave it out. If you leave it out, it's going to default to false, but it's always good in code to make it very clear what you want to do. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to listen for a bubbling event, and the first thing we need to do is we need to check if there is a target element. We don't know what kind of weird things could happen. So we check if there is a target. That's a property of the event object. It has a lot of properties depending on what kind of event it is and what you can do with it. So it has some properties and some methods you can call. So we're going to use the target. The target is the one you clicked, and if we have a target and the target have a class, we're only interested in our case in a target element that has a class, because we're going to use that to identify it. So if we have a class, then we're going to take the classes or class depending on how many there are and save it in our variable. So target dot class name, and we're going to make it into an array because it's just convenient for us when we need to check if the class is there. So we have an array here of the classes, and then we're gonna check, let's make an if statement. If that array contains index of, it contains the can-click class. That's the one we added before. And we do that like this. Oops. If it has the can-click class, then we want to highlight the indicator with the color of the button. I have made some styling already, so if we add a class of red to the indicator, then it will be red. Unfortunately, my styling is in lowercase, so I guess we will have to lowercase everything. So we're going to take the indicator and class name. That was not what I wanted to do. Class name equal to e.target or value. So we want to get the value. We want to make that lowercase, I guess. I think we can do it like that. So now we just lowercase that one and add the class name to the indicator. And then we just need to close our if statement and hope it works. So let's try it. So if I click the blue button, then you can see the indicator becomes blue. Click the green one, it becomes green and red. So it works. So we have delegated the event to be on a parent. We could have attached one to each button, but we just did it all with one event listener. So of course this doesn't show us exactly that it works, because we have no buttons that doesn't fill up the criteria. So we could go down here and we could remove the can-click class from this one. And now the blue button shouldn't work. So if I click the blue one, well, it doesn't work, but the green and the red one still works. Yeah. If I click the blue one now, it doesn't go white. It will probably be a little bit more intuitive if it did, but we can easily fix that. So we can just reset the class name of the indicator to an empty string. So now if I click the green one and the blue one, then it becomes white again. So that's event delegation. One thing you can do, I didn't explain before actually, we can go back to the page over here, is that I have some code here. So the thing you can do when an event is bubbling up or capturing down the DOM tree, you can stop it at a certain event listener. So I could actually go to this one and I could stop it using a method that's on the event object itself called stop propagation. Oops. So if I call stop propagation, then because I have added these event listeners, I'm just looping over the parent element. So the first parent element that reaches that the event reaches is going to stop the propagation. So if I now click the blue one, then it's going to stop at R1, and the same for all the others, because I stopped propagation. Of course, it's not very useful to just stop propagation like that unless you have some reason to do it, but we could say that, for instance, we have this group over here where we don't want to stop propagation. We want the event to propagate all the way up to the body element, but for this group over here we don't want that. So we could, instead of just stopping propagation like this, we could make some kind of condition for stopping the propagation. We could say that if the current target, that's another property of the event object. The current target is the one that the event is at the moment. So if current target have an ID of right, we stop propagation. So this one have an ID of right. I just highlighted, I wrote the IDs here for convenience. So this one have an ID of right, and there's an ID of body, and R2 and R1 and whatever. So if it has an ID of right, we stop propagation. We can check if this works, but I need to save the file first. No, I didn't save the file. Oh, that was the long way around. So the file is saved. So if I click the blue one now, see the propagation stops at right. It never reached the body element. But if I click the purple one, it propagates all the way up. So now we have two different conditions going on. So that was just the last thing I wanted to say about events in the browser and event delegation. I hope it was useful. If you liked it, then you can thumb it up, and you can also leave a comment underneath. And hope to see you next time. Thank you.